everybody, welcome to the Mr. Bobby's Models podcast. I hope you're all safe and well. I'm excited to announce this podcast. Hopefully, if all goes well, this will be a regular model horse related podcast for you to listen to while you're at work or while you're on model horse sales pages, whatever it may be. I am so excited to be doing this. I've been thinking of doing one for a while, and this evening I've sat down and I've decided that I'm going to make it happen. Eventually, I would like to have a visual to this podcast as well. Currently, it's just an audio and a logo on your screen. If you have any feedback for this podcast, if you have any ideas, any suggestions, absolutely leave them in the comments. I would love to hear from you guys. I would like to hear what you think about a podcast in general for model horse hobbyists. But yeah, if you have any specific feedback, that would be absolutely so helpful. I would like to make these podcasts sort of my little project to gradually improve on and develop and hopefully turn them into something very entertaining for you to listen to. So fingers crossed this works out. This is my very first attempt, so we'll see how this goes. I'm also going to say now that I don't think I'm going to edit these podcasts so much. I'm obviously going to try to make the audio as clear as I possibly can, but I don't believe that I'm going to go in and clip out every little pause, every little stumble that I have. I don't speak particularly fluently or particularly quickly, but hopefully I don't speak so badly that I'm going to have to edit it. I kind of want these podcasts to have a very open, conversational, discussion-like feel. So you kind of feel like you're actually hanging out with me and actually having a conversation with me, just because they're the kinds of podcasts that I like to listen to. And I also feel like that kind of content isn't often seen in the model horse community. And I do know that on YouTube in general, podcasts are really, really popular. For that reason, people like to hang out with their favourite creators for a prolonged time and sort of in a more raw and open way. So we're going to try that. If you really hate the unedited style, do let me know. It might be that I start editing the podcasts a little bit more. Anyway, with all of that out the way, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, so you know who the heck I am. And then we're going to just talk about my general overall thoughts of the hobby. And then I have also asked on my Instagram, which is Mr. Bobby's Models, for some questions from my Instagram friends on the online community about the hobby and potentially about real horses as well. So we're going to mix real and model ponies. So let's go. Right, about me. My name is Amy. Hello. I'm 21 years old. And I've been collecting since April 2010, so an entire decade now. Wow. Yeah, I was 11 when I got my first model. I got my very first model and my very first Briar accessories ever for my 11th birthday, which was on the 22nd of April 2010. I actually came across model horses from a friend who was the same friend who got me on a horse for the very first time, and I used to go to riding lessons with her. So without her, I wouldn't collect model horses or have real horses, so that's kind of crazy to think about. But anyway, I found out about Briars through her. She had a couple of them, and she was riding for a bit longer than me, and she knew more about horses than I did when I was introduced to horses. And bless her, she used to teach me, as an 11-year-old, stuff about horses using her Briars and her Briar accessories. I have vivid memories of that. It's crazy. And then, you know, little old me went online and discovered the world of Briar very, very quickly, and I immediately fell in love. So I asked my parents if they would buy me one traditional model and a couple of accessories for that model for my 11th birthday. They said yes. And I remember spending literally like 2 months deciding which brayer I wanted for my first brayer. I was a very indecisive child. I still am indecisive. It came down to either Rachel Alexandra, Fleet Street Max, or Isadora Cruz. They were kind of the popular, commonly found regular runs at the time. Oh, and Secretariat too, on the Smarty Jones mould, not the original standing Secretariat. So I spent months picking the model out, doing so much research, watching the old school unboxings on YouTube, which were really terrible quality and you couldn't really see what was going on. Those were the good old days. And I eventually chose Isadora Cruz. So I got her as my very first traditional. I also got a Western Rider and a Western Tack set, if I didn't already say that already. And I have just loved the models ever since. And I've been collecting them on and off for the entire decade. I did take a break for, I think, 3 years where I didn't buy a single model. I sold a couple before the break, but I kept hold of most of my collection. And then again, a few years after that, I did a big downsize to my collection because I don't like to let my collection get too big. So I did a downsize. I actually don't know how many models I have, and I hope somebody doesn't. I hope nobody asks me that as one of the questions, because I honestly don't count them, because the number isn't important to me. In fact, I like to keep my collection small. But yeah, I have pretty consistently been buying models, apart from that big break and the downsize, for 10 entire years, which is just absolutely insane. And I can't really believe it, to be honest with you. So that's me. Hello. I hope you know a little bit about me now. Oh, the one thing I will add is the reason that I took a few years break from collecting. I took a break between 2013 and the end of 2015. And that was because I actually had my first pony in that time. I bought my first pony in August 2013. And I felt this like sudden feeling of I didn't need my models anymore. My models were sort of filling that hole in my heart that a real horse could fill. And I just didn't feel the need to collect them anymore. It's not that I didn't love them anymore. And that's why I didn't really sell any models during that first break. Because I still loved them. I just felt like I didn't need to buy any more. And all of my money and time and effort and love was going to my now real horse. When I sold him, I then had a break between horses for a few months where I was struggling to find my next horse. So I actually came back to the hobby, and I have continued to be in that hobby since. And like I say, the only time I've really wavered is when I had a massive downsize because my collection was getting out of control. So yeah, that's the only thing I would add in terms of my collecting history, in case you were wondering. So yeah, that is me. That's pretty much my entire collecting history. So now I'm going to answer a couple of the questions I have been asked on Instagram, and hopefully this will help you to give you more of an insight of me as a collector and my opinions and stuff like that. So somebody has asked, what is my favourite model that I own? And that's such a horrible question, but it's an important question, but it's a horrible one. And I have 3 models in my head, so I'm going to tell you about all 3, and then I'm probably going to have to pick one, aren't I? So Isadora Cruz was my very first bride traditional, as I've just said. I love her so much, and I just think my collection wouldn't be complete without her. I've had her for the full 10 years, and I will have her for the rest of my life. She's one of those models that even if I didn't collect anymore and sold my collection, I would still keep hold of her. So she's one of my favourites. Another one of my favourites is I have an Idicus Conga. I am obsessed with the mould, and I actually got one of them painted as a portrait model of my current real horse Bobby, who I'm obsessed with. I've owned him for 4 years now, just over 4 years, and he's just my everything. So to have a portrait model of him is really cool, and I actually have a lying down resin foal of him painted as a portrait of him too, which is also adorable. But if we're sticking to briars, then it would be the traditional Idicus that I like. And then there is a third model, but I don't think he'll win first place. I used to ride a pony called Murphy at the riding school I very first went to a decade ago, and he was like my favourite pony, but he got sold one day and I was gutted, absolutely heartbroken, because he was one of my favourites. Sorry if you heard the clicking just then. And then I bought the model Esprit, is that how you say it? The traditional windswept, funny shoulder looking mould, that guy, the Esprit, the Weghorse. And he, at the time, reminded me so much of that pony. So he means a lot to me. He's been with me probably for the most part of those 10 years, maybe 9 years now. Wow, that's scary to think about. I think of the three, it's definitely out of Isadora Cruz and my custom portrait model. I'm tempted to actually say Isadora Cruz because I can always get another portrait model made if something were to happen to my custom, but I could never replace my first Briar, ever. There's just something about your first Briar model that just has some unique sentimental value. So I'm going to say her, but my portrait model is so close to being first. So, yes. The same person asked, favourite Peter Stone mould? Probably... I really don't know, honestly. I don't collect Peter Stones as much. I have 2 issues. I used to have 3, and they are beautiful, and I love all the custom sculpted variations of them, and I just think every Peter Stone model collector needs an ish in their life. So I'm tempted to say them. However, I absolutely love the Arab filly that they released a couple of years ago, the little foal. Oh my goodness, so cute. Very expensive for her size, but absolutely adorable. So actually tempted to say a foal mould, which I wouldn't say about a Briar ever, but yeah. Maybe the foal mould, actually. Someone's asked model with the most sentimental value. I guess I've kind of covered 2 of them. My first, 3 of them actually. I'm trying to think if to be honest, a lot of my models have a lot of memories attached to them, and I'm very sentimentally attached to them, and I try to keep my collection to only models with some value to me. So most of my collection has some kind of sentimental value. I really don't know. I can't choose. I will say, actually, yeah, there is one model that I will answer this question with. She's not necessarily my most sentimental model, but she's definitely up there with one of the most, and that is Sheila. She was the Briarfest 2016 Bobby Joe special run. The reason I bought her, my grandma passed away that year maybe, or the year before. I can't remember now. A few years ago anyway, before Briarfest 2016. And then when I discovered that Briar had made a model called Sheila, which was my grandma's name, I had to get it. I did not care what it looked like. My grandma meant a lot to me, and when she passed away I was extremely sad. And there was just something about the Briar model Sheila, and obviously it having the name, I just had to get it. So I found one, imported it from the US, and I do love her, and her name will forever be Sheila because I love that name and obviously it means a lot to me. So yeah, I'm gonna say her for that question. Somebody else has asked, what was your first live show like? I haven't been to like loads and loads and loads of live shows. However, as a kid, I used to go to like one annually. My very first show, I must have been like 12 years old at my first ever show. So I don't really remember. I remember overall I had a bunch of fun, and I actually have three models that I bought at that very first live show I went to, like 9 years ago now. I remember having such a good day. It was an Utterly Horses like live show and workshop day. If any UK collectors out there remember Utterly Horses, you'll know that they used to throw amazing like live shows and workshops and all kinds of stuff. They were a really nice company who tried to do a lot for UK collectors. Yeah, I went to one of their like workshop and live show days for my very first show, and for my first few shows I would only exclusively go to them because I did like them and I wanted to support them as a company, since they were a small and independent UK company. Yeah, I don't know honestly, but I remember having a lot of fun, and I still have the models from that show. Somebody's asked, dream colour on your favourite mould. So what would be my dream coat colour on my favourite mould? Well, my favourite mould is Idicus, and I would have said portrait model of my horse, but I have one of those. So I think, that's really difficult. Maybe like a liver chestnut, or a chestnut with like a flaxen mane. No, liver chestnut, 100%, and a glossy one, absolutely. Again, I would say dapple grey, but I have Valiant and Bow, both the dapple greys, so I don't really want to say that. Yeah, I'm going to go with like a glossy liver chestnut, or a glossy chestnut a bit like Redmond on the Bristol mould. I like him. So that's a good question. Thoughts on Briarfest 2020, somebody has asked. Do you know what? Overall, I like the theme and the models this year. Briar seem to have put a bit of effort into the theme, which is always nice to see, and they've done some surprising models this year. So overall, I'm quite impressed. Obviously, this year's a virtual experience, which is different to any other Briarfest that's ever been held ever. This is the first time it's ever been held fully on a virtual location. Honestly though, I know that it has had to be online because of unfortunate circumstances, and I know that the world is going through a bit of a rough time right now, but for me, I'm actually very excited for Briarfest to be online, and I think it's a massive silver lining for a lot of collectors. First of all, we get to still attend a Briarfest. A lot of people were speculating that Briar were just going to cancel it or just literally sell the models to like collector club members online. But no, they've decided to throw the entire event virtually, which they didn't really have to do. So I really appreciate their efforts and their decision to do that and try to do as much as possible for collectors who were looking forward to Briarfest this year. Also, it has a massive advantage for international collectors. I am an international collector, and I'll tell you now, it is impossible to get Briarfest models and exclusive models in the UK without paying an absolute fortune. Obviously, Briarfest models tend to sell more on the second-hand market, and then you have to pay like $50 to get it shipped to the UK, and then you have to pay a very expensive customs fee, and you can pay like $200 for like a regular special run, and they're just not worth that. It's just so expensive that it's not worth it to buy models from the US on the second-hand market. So for Briar to have Bridefest online, it means that I can buy special runs, and other internationals obviously can buy special runs and store exclusive models and pop-up tent models direct from Briar. They have done a flat shipping rate for all international people, so I only have to pay $25 shipping per checkout, which is far better than the usual $50. And I might still have to pay a customs fee, but I'm paying the original price for all of the models and all of the stuff I buy, and I'm only paying $25 shipping, which is actually quite a good shipping rate from the US. Normally, if you buy from a secondhand seller, it can be normally $30 to $45. If you order from Briar on a normal day, it's $50 plus. So it's quite a good price. So it has a huge advantage for international people, and as well as just the models, like we get to participate in the event. Like I could never fly to Kentucky. I've wanted to for 10 years, but the flights are so expensive. Travel insurance is expensive. I'd have to figure out the accommodation, and because I'm 21, I'm not old enough to get insured on a hire car. Generally, you have to be 25. So I'd have to figure out a way of us getting from the accommodation to the park and so forth. I'd have to figure out food. I'm a vegetarian, with a couple of, dietary requirements. Yeah. So that's a little bit difficult. Obviously, if I was staying in a hotel, food wouldn't necessarily be provided, etc., etc. It's a whole faff, and a very expensive one, so it's not really possible for me. I would love to do it one day, but I've got to really, really save up if I ever want to go physically. So having it online, honestly, is the biggest relief ever, because I actually get to participate. I actually get to join in with the fun, and yeah, I'm just so excited for that. And I don't even care that, we're doing the workshops on Zoom and stuff. Like, that's way cooler than not participating at all. Yeah, so honestly, I just want to say, overall, I'm impressed with Briar. They're clearly working very, very hard. They've made some choices that obviously not everybody's going to be happy with. It's one of those things, like, Briar are kind of in a situation where they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. If they choose to do something one way, some people are going to get upset, but if they did it another way, other people would get upset. You know what I mean? So I think Briar, overall, if you're listening, you're doing a good job, and I'm very excited. If you do want to hear my opinion on the models more specifically, I do have an opinions video. There have been a couple of releases since I put out that video, but you'll get my overall opinions. So yes, somebody has said, show us the custom of your real horse. Because this is only a visual, an audio podcast, sorry, I can't do that, but I will absolutely post him on my Instagram more if you are interested in seeing him. Oh, and she's also asked what got you into model horses. And like I said, my friend actually got me into them because she would teach me stuff about real life horses using her models in her bedroom when I was 10, nearly 11 years old. And I fell in love with briarhorses.com, and that's that. I believe so far they're all the questions that I have been asked. Let me just update my Instagram. Bear with. Yes, I've answered all the ones so far. I didn't put the story on very long ago. I'm a little bit unorganised today. I should have put it on earlier. Never mind. I would like to hear all of your thoughts about Briarfest, though. Jumping back to the Briarfest conversation, I know a lot of people are genuinely upset that Briarfest is online this year, so I would like to hear people's opinions about that and the virtual experience overall. Do you think Briar have done a good job? Do you know anyone who works at Briar? I'd love to know that. Wasn't there a YouTuber who used to just post YouTube videos and then she got a job with Briar? What was she called? Is she like Joyce Wolf? Moon or something like that. I remember her getting a job at Briar because she made a analytics video about Briar's marketing for a Bristol model, and then shortly after she turned up in a Briar official video on YouTube. Very interesting. I don't know if anybody knows what I'm on about right now. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on BriarFest being virtual this year. One thing I will add actually about BriarFest being a virtual experience, and I do hope that this message comes across to Briar, if not from me, sort of from their own thoughts in their own time. I really do hope that BriarFest doesn't jump back to its previous formula next year. I would like BriarFest to be a physical experience again for other people to enjoy it. I'm not being selfish because I'm international. I would absolutely love BriarFest to be physical next year if obviously the global situation has calmed down enough by then for it to be safe to hold that event. But I do hope that Briar learn a lot from this virtual experience this year, and they learn about how many international customers are actually interested in BriarFest and how they can make it more accessible to them, and even non-internationals, just people who can't afford to take the trip to Kentucky. Even if you're in the US, you might be on, I don't know, you might be hours and hours away in a completely different state and it's just not possible for you to fly or drive. I really hope that Briar sort of see that and see that there is such a demand for accessibility to BriarFest for people who can't normally make it. I'm not entirely sure how they would pull that off, maybe do sort of a hybrid between an online and a physical experience, or it might be that they open up leftover stock on briarhorses.com, or I'm not entirely sure how they would do that. But I do hope that they see the advantages of having a virtual element to BriarFest. Not just for internationals, for actual attendees as well, but especially for those people who can't make it to the physical BriarFest on a normal year. Yeah, it would be absolutely wonderful for them to make some changes. Because BriarFest, the thing about physical BriarFest, as I'm calling it, is that it follows a very set formula. They go to the same park every year. They do the same thing every year. I think the biggest change they've made in the past decade is where the special run line is, or where the line to the Briar store is. But it's all pretty much in the same place, and same formula, same events, all of that. And I do think BriarFest was in need of a bit of a change. It runs the risk of being too formulaic, that collectors can go once and they've then seen it all, and there's no need for them to go back again, other than new year, new models. I have thought that for a few years, that BriarFest is just following the same formula over and over again. So having an online BriarFest is very refreshing, and I do hope that this makes a permanent change to the formula. Even if they do jump back to a physical BriarFest, I do hope that the traditional formula for BriarFest does get refreshed a little bit. That's all I have to say about that. They're just my thoughts. You can absolutely disagree with me, and I don't mean to criticize Briar necessarily. I'm just saying that all the BriarFest experience videos I've ever seen from any year in the past decade have looked identical. And there's only so many times somebody will go to an identical event, especially when it costs a lot of money. So yeah, I'm going to check one more time on Instagram to see if anybody else has asked questions. But if not, I think I might wrap up this podcast. Yeah, that's it for the moment. So I want to thank you all so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you found it interesting. It's not supposed to be some super incredible, exciting, crazy podcast. It's just supposed to be a nice conversation about model horses. So with that in mind, please do leave me feedback. It would really, really help. I genuinely thrive off feedback. I would like to improve these podcasts. I am making these as, a project to do during lockdown, partly to, satisfy my own boredom, but also to provide you guys with some kind of entertainment and hope that you guys aren't bored since you're out of school or on furlough or whatever it might be. So these podcasts are predominantly made for you, so I would absolutely love it if I heard from you and if you guys could have an input for the podcast. I'm not entirely sure what the theme of the next podcast is going to be. Have not planned that far ahead yet. So now's your chance to say something about the theme of the next podcast. I definitely know that after Briarfest, I will be doing a podcast just on my thoughts from Briarfest and sort of almost like a review and a reflection of the weekend. But obviously I cannot do that until after Briarfest. I can't talk about something that I can't reflect on something that hasn't happened yet. I would like to do some Briarfest related podcasts entirely though. I was also considering playing some like trivia games or Briarfest Briar ranking games and stuff like that. Just mindless stuff that you can listen to for fun. So yes, I hope you have a fantastic day. I know I've said this like 10 times, but thank you so much for listening. And I will see you in the next podcast. Goodbye.